You actually opened this show on commentary. We're starting off hot with Hulk Hogan, and we're coming off a week before where Nitro was preempted. So getting something started with Hogan walking out, it's really to just grab everyone's attention to get the show started, is it not?
It is indeed. You open hot, you end hot, you have something really cool in the middle of it all, the crossover as we used to call it. And chances are you'll close the night with a pretty good show. But starting out with Hogan hot was a good move at the time. And by the way, this is about the same period of time, I think. You know how I am with timelines.
Yes.
Where I don't have a freaking clue half the time. but I think this was right around the same period of time that I flew down to Hulk's home and tried to convince him to turn heel. Right about this. This might have been a little bit after that visit, but it was right around the same period of time.
We are in the time frame of WrestleMania 12 ending, and if anyone who knows the timeline of this, as Eric said, WrestleMania 12 was the last match of Diesel on a big pay-per-view before you'd wrap up the next month, and Scott Hall would also wrap up the next month at the WWF. So we are prepping for the premier debut of the NWO just a week, or I'm sorry, just 6 weeks after this. So yeah, you're in that time frame, Eric. I'm impressed with your memory.
Sometimes, after I've been doing these shows for 7 years, so some of it's starting to kind of gel.
It's good. That's good. You opened the show, and I wanted to bring this up to you right out of the gate. You got Hogan taking on Arn Anderson and Kevin Sullivan in a handicap match. But your opening line in your commentary is, "This is real. This is live. This is fresh. This is WCW Nitro. This isn't history. This is history in the making."
Wow,
It was
impressive. I didn't even have a writer back then. That's pretty awesome.
It was a big deal to go every week live on TNT, was it not?
Well, it was one of the big differentiators, better than, less than, different than. And I knew I couldn't be better than WWE at targeting the teen and preteen audience. They had a lock on that. The 18 to 49-year-old demo was completely underserved. I knew that was my opportunity. But even given that, I knew that I had to present something different in order for people to try us out and obviously to stick around. And of all of the things that made us different, and it's interesting because it's the bedrock of professional wrestling formats today, but guess who did first? Weekly live was the game changer that I think is partly responsible for the huge success and license fees and programming that this genre has become, is directly related to the fact that I made the conscious effort to go live when my competition was not.
Now you're 7 months into the run of Nitro at this point. How quickly is the learning curve, and how quickly did you have to adjust to things as time went on?
Well, adjusting as time goes on is a constant state of affairs. Everything changes every single day in live television. And there's always a new challenge. There's always a new opportunity. There's always something that comes into your life at the last minute that you have to, adjust for. So that's just part of the game when you do live TV every week. Now, WWE did do live, I think, every other week, but we were live every week, the first ones to do it. And y'all can thank me in my social media at eBischoff. You're more than welcome.
You're the reason we have professional wrestling live 6 days a week now. So for that, I don't know whether to thank you or just tell you how burned out you can be sometimes.
Kind of screwed up everybody's life, didn't I?
Yeah, you know what? I will. That might be a good T-shirt for you. I'm sorry I screwed up your life with too much wrestling. Hey, here's the good news. While we're watching this match, Brutus Beefcake was supposed to be in this match and couldn't make it. So that's a plus.
I can't imagine why, because he was Brutus after all.
I will tell this backstage story behind 83 weeks. I texted Eric a couple months ago and I said, "How about a Brutus Beefcake episode?" And he asked me how high I was. So he decided not to do that episode, but it's always funny. We are, if you're watching the match with us, and please, we'll have the link below. It is just classic, old school, two of the greatest heels in Arn Anderson and Kevin Sullivan, and the greatest babyface ever was in Hulk Hogan. It's just paint by numbers, picture perfect. There's the big leg drop. 1, 2, 3. Hogan gets the win. And we're going to be just a few months away. Oh, there's a woman. Man, talk about an underrated manager. just a few months away from from him in the NWO, the landscape of professional wrestling changes in 3 months. When you talk about Hulk Hogan and now staring down Elizabeth, got Randy Savage involved, Ric Flair involved. There ain't no bigger names than those three at that time in professional wrestling, was there?
No, we had the deck pretty well stacked for an opening match, didn't we? But this was, was one of the things that made us so different. If you remember back when Nitro first started and I started putting pay-per-view quality matches on free TV, that was the big criticism for guys like Meltzer and others who were kind of following in his lead. Oh, it's going to kill the business. There's no way it's going to work. The pay-per-view business is going to die, blah, 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 fucking blah. And they were all wrong, because this is what made Nitro work. Nitro is what made WWE work. And what we did on Nitro and what WWE is currently doing is what's making pay-per-views, now PLEs, more profitable than they've ever been.
Ever been. Between gates, between TV rights, between merchandise, there is nothing that's more profitable right now than WWE's ever been. Adam Clemens has a great question for you. Ask Eric, who decided to go to a 2-hour show?
That was, first of all, it was Brad Siegel, probably Ted. I could be wrong on this, so I don't want anybody to quote me and, go fucking nuts because you've got nothing else in your life to do. But I think it was the plan all along. I mean, after Ted laid it on me and said, here's what I want you to do, I think there was only an hour available initially. And because of ad sales commitments, we had to wait for a period of time before we could transition to a 2-hour show. But ultimately, that would have been Ted's decision. More than likely, it was Brad Siegel's decision.
Walking down in the ring right now to stop Jimmy Hart from getting his ass kicked is the Giant. When you talk about young talent, the size of him, everything that went with him, everybody talks about how WCW didn't create stars, but no one knew who he was until he walked out on that stage back in Halloween Havoc and became world champion on the first night. Do you think WCW never gets enough credit for the growth of Paul White?
Oh, I don't think about it that way. And I'm not sure how I feel about that statement. I could probably agree with it in some respects, but I can also disagree with that. I don't think did Paul reach, look, I know Paul made more money, but so did everybody else.
Sure.
Eventually. I know Paul got to play in some amazing big stages because it's WWE. But if you really could quantify or qualify how over Paul was, I don't think Paul got any more over in WWE than he was in WCW. And I could probably argue that he was a little more over in WCW because he was new and fresh. I look at the way WWE used Paul. And by the way, I am not being critical because I couldn't figure out a way to make him work. And by the way, neither could anybody else that really wanted him to stay there, including Hulk. You just can't use a guy like Paul in anything other than an attraction kind of role. He's not a weekly guy.
Right.
It's too hard to build stories around someone like Paul. Paul is a legitimate giant in so many legitimate ways, an insurmountable object, which is good if you're an attraction, Andre the Giant. But if you're a weekly TV guy, that means you're involved in a story, which means you have to have sympathy. You got to be able to get sympathy. How do you get sympathy on a freak? Not a freak, that's derogatory. How do you get a sympathy on a larger than life character? How does he sell? Who does he sell to? It's really hard. And WWE didn't have any more luck with him than I did. So I don't think it's whether WCW gets enough credit or WWE doesn't get enough credit or whatever, however you feel about it. I think that the fact remains that both companies had a really hard time getting the maximum potential out of Paul because both companies overexposed him because he's such a mountain.
Were you surprised to see Vince, I don't want to say bumble him, because they really did bumble him when they walked over, knowing his history with Giants and knowing his father's affliction for Andre, how they messed him up that quickly, that fast?
Good question. Honest answer, WWE to a degree had to overcome how we launched Paul White as the son of Andre. We didn't do a good job at that. Arguably, we did an embarrassingly bad job with that. So for Vince to somehow connect Paul White's dots to Andre the Giant wouldn't have worked. I wouldn't have done either, right? So that takes that off the table. But as far as Vince understanding how to use a giant, how to use an attraction, there's probably nobody in, walking around in a pair of shoes better than Vince because he's had the most experience with it. But I think where Vince made a poor judgment, I'm calling a mistake. It's just a 2020 hindsight. It was a bad decision. He overexposed Paul. And I think part of that is because Vince was a little desperate. We were kicking his ass. He needed something quick. I've been around Vince enough, very little, but just enough. Once he sets his mind on something and he's feeling the pressure, he's going to go. I think he pulled the trigger too soon with Paul. Didn't think it through. He was too eager to get a win. Sound familiar? Eager to get a win. And in the process of getting that win, probably didn't set Paul up for success.
On camera right now is you, Bobby Heenan, and Steve Mongo McMichael, Hall of Famer. AEW is highlighting him Saturday on Collision because they are in Chicago for this past day. The monumental support in Mongo's passing away and having Rick go out on stage and talk about him that's gonna air on Saturday at Collision shows the impact that Mongo had on wrestling fans 30 years later, does it not?
Yeah, I wish he would have got a little more love while he was still with us. He was the subject of a lot of derision among the basement dwellers and low-hanging fruit on the internet. And that stuff was hurtful, and I'm sure Steve, like a lot of us that are used to it, probably let it go. Probably didn't affect him too much. But it would have been nice for him to get a little taste of that love while he was still able to enjoy it. But I'm glad to see it either way. His wife Misty is, able to experience it and hear some of the outpouring and support. So I'm happy for that.
Were you surprised to see AEW give him that spotlight, even though, he never worked for the company, or are you just happy that someone's making the recognition for him?
Fully expected it.
Okay. We got 2 guys coming down to the ring. 4 guys. Sorry. I forgot the Nasty Boys jumped the Public Enemy here. It is going to be a street fight. And speaking of street fights, one of the hardcore icons unfortunately passed away this past week. Man, you dealt with very early on in the Nitro years and possibly in 2000, homicidal, genocidal, suicidal Sabu. Eric, first off, what can you tell me about your interactions with Sabu?
My interactions with Sabu were very limited. Kevin Sullivan really dealt with Sabu much more exclusively. Really, Terry Taylor might have worked with him a little bit too, but it was really Kevin Sullivan. I didn't really have a lot to do with that. It was just not my area of expertise, that style of wrestling. I was happy that he was with us, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't have a lot to contribute to that particular style that Sabu came to the table with, and I trusted Kevin's judgment much more in that respect.
Did you get a chance to ever sit down, have a beer with him, have a conversation with him at any point in time during the convention circuit afterwards or anything like that?
No, I've seen Sabu a couple times over the years, and my impression, because we never talked, but I can read a room pretty well. My impression is he didn't have a lot of time for me, which is fine. He never got to know me. He didn't really understand what was going on behind the scenes. Talent, more often than not, the world exists and it's confined to their aspect of the professional wrestling business, meaning most of them, even mid-card, low-card rookies, have a much better feel for what goes on inside of a ring and what should go on inside of a ring than probably 95 or 98% of the television executives, which I was. that's not an issue. But conversely, talent, with very few exceptions, are ever exposed to the business side of the wrestling business. They don't understand it. They don't have to deal with it. Not that they're not capable of understanding it. It's just that they don't have to understand it.
Right.
It's not what they do during the day or during the night. And if you don't understand the business of the wrestling business, you're going to come into conflict with the people that do, because they have responsibilities that may not make sense to you if you don't understand the business side of things. So that's why I say, if I had heat with Sabu, first of all, I understand why. Let's put it that way. Or with any former talent that really never got to know me. It's part of the business. It's part of every business, actually, right? If you're in sales, but you don't really understand what's going on in operations, you may get information coming to you from your sales manager or corporate that absolutely makes no sense to you. It's
Right.
boots on the ground, customer facing, right? Sometimes that happens in wrestling too. So it's cool.
Do you think that and I'm speaking 30 years ago, because I think there's a lot more people in tune with the business now than they were 30 years ago, that there was a expectation of, you're the talent, you stay in your lane, we're office, we'll handle what we do. And that created a lot of distrust back then.
I never saw that. I mean, I may have come off that way. And listen, when I was on a live shoot, particularly back then, because of the nature of what was going on, both good and bad, it was all freaking challenging.
Right.
Every aspect of it was intensely challenging, good and bad, right? Even if it was good stuff, it was intense.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I don't think I'm abnormal in the sense that when I'm working and I'm in an intense environment, the last freaking thing I'm going to worry about is whether I rub you the wrong way because I didn't acknowledge you in the hallway as I'm set myself on fire to get over to that problem, put that fire out. And, just in a normal course of business, I'm sure I've rubbed people the wrong way. And their impression was, oh, he just didn't have time for me. He thinks he's too good for me. No, there's a fire over there. You don't even know it. And this shit on my back is water. Get out of my way. But that doesn't always come off too well.
Right. We're watching a hardcore match between Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock, the Public Enemy, taking on the Nasty Boys. I got to ask, Eric, what's the nastiest Nasty Boy story you got for me?
I'm going to leave a name out.
Okay.
Because that's only fair. It's not my story to tell in that much detail. But, and I didn't see this.
Okay.
However, source I trust implicitly. Two guys are out in an event in a nightclub. One of them is grotesquely drunk. You can use your imagination.
Sure.
These two guys are friends. Hang out. Go out to dinner occasionally, lunch, tacos on a Saturday afternoon. Chased by about 46 beers. Normal shit, right?
Yeah.
But these guys are in a club. They're at an event. The drunk guy standing at the bar getting drunker. The other guy decides he's going to use the restroom. Guy goes to use the restroom, and the drunk guy goes, "Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna go take a leak too and see what's up with my buddy." So they're standing there doing what you do at a urinal. And the drunk guy turns around and says, "What the fuck? Why did you do this for me?" Forgetting, by the way, that he was in mid-freaking stream and whizzed all over the other guy. Now, I didn't name any names.
I noticed that.
So my conscience is clear. My conscience is clear. And I'll let you use your imagination. Because that's what a good storyteller does, by the way.
Yeah.
Ages the listener's conversation.
Can I make an educated guess?
as long as you don't mind if I don't acknowledge whether you're correct, sure.
I'm going to lean towards one of the guys in this match was the one who turned.
No.
Oh, interesting. See, that's a story right there because I didn't know where I was going now.
No, you wouldn't have guessed this one.
You know, I got to be honest, when we sat down to record this, I didn't know where this match was going to go, but I'm very happy it went the way it did.
I know, man. That's the beauty. See, Derek, you get me. And Conrad gets me. And most people that I've been working with for the last 7 years, even if it's only occasionally, get me. Because I love this kind of spontaneous, no format. Let's have a real conversation.
That's true.
I don't have answers already figured out in my head. I spent hours doing research. Let's just riff. And that's where the gold happens, at least in my experience.
I agree. And now I'm looking forward to someone going out there and trying to figure out what Eric's talking about. And please tweet me your gifts at Derek Sabato. I want to see what you guys are thinking. Who is involved in that? We're going to finish up this match very shortly. This type of wrestling I grew up on. I grew up in South Jersey. I'm right outside of Philadelphia. So I
what's your time code right now, bro?
I am at 22:12.
Holy shit. I gotta keep
my
up.
head. My ahead of you?
Just a little bit. Let me get caught up. Boom.
There you go.
Now I'm probably a little ahead of you, but that's okay.
That's okay. So I grew up watching the Public Enemy. I was 11 years old when this episode originally aired on Nitro. And Public Enemy was a big deal to me. When 4 guys like this got in the ring with each other and beat the shit out of each other, I found it entertaining. Did you?
No.
Okay.
I just didn't. And I never have. Even when I was, way before I ever got into the business, or even, I never even dreamt I'd ever be in the business. But when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, watching AWA, there were matches. I remember Mad Dog Vachon was in a promo in the AWA building a casket. And, there's some crazy, goofy shit there too. And a lot of people liked it. I just never did. I liked the Billy Robinson, Nick Bockwinkel, early Kurt Hennig, Vern Gagne, even Greg, Greg and Jim Brunzell. Wow. That's the kind of wrestling that I grew up with. So that's what I've always had an affinity for. But this is, kind of being relatively smart or just having an instinct to survive. I was aware that there was a lot of the audience like you that did like it. So the fact that I didn't prevent me from doing it. I just didn't enjoy that part of my show.
I've never asked you this question, and now that you brought it up, I want to ask the question. Have you seen Hogan Bockwinkel, the Phantom title change in the AWA?
Oh, I'm sure I have. I know I have. Probably going back to 1989 when I produced the best of the 80s for AWA, and I had access to all that footage. So I'm sure that I did, but I can't say that it stands out on my mind, actually.
I would love, maybe this is next month, finding a compilation of AWA matches on YouTube, because if you haven't seen the crowd reactions that went along with Hulk Hogan and his original run in the AWA, and Nick Bockwinkel being the best heel that ever existed, Bobby Heenan.
Jared, I'll tell you what, I love that idea so much. If we can figure out how to aggregate 3 or 4 really cool AWA matches from that era and talk about them, compare them to today's action, I would love to do that show.
Yeah. Because I don't think people realize how over Hogan was before he went to New York and how great a heel Bockwinkel was. I know it's 40 years ago and I get it, and it's before I was even born. But if you've never watched it, go out of your way to find it, and I will find a way to put that compilation together. But there is so many great AWA matches that are probably forgotten in time. You talk about Dusty Rhodes, Dick the Bruiser, Crusher. I understand it might not be everybody's cup of tea nowadays, but it's awesome.
But it's so much fun, even if you go, because I do, it's like watching, old NFL reels from the 60s or 50s. It's like, okay, I'm pretty sure my high school team could have been a little bit competitive with that NFL team from the 60s. everything changes.
Yep.
Athletes say, are bigger, faster, stronger, smarter, whatever. Coaching everything has changed. But when you go back and you watch some of that early stuff, especially with wrestling, and pay attention to the psychology as opposed to, wow, look at these guys aren't very athletic. Look at the beer belly on that guy. But if you really zero in on the psychology and how they manipulated the audience and the timing of that manipulation, it really becomes fascinating to watch in a whole different way.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I'll work on that. I'll work on that for next month because I think that'd be a lot of fun to watch that.
Yeah, I know it would be.
And to expose things that probably have been forgotten. We don't want, and I'll speak from this personally, I don't want things like that to disappear. I want that type of stuff that's out there to make sure that it stays because it's worth it. It's worth watching. And it's really cool to watch evolution. You will see Hulk Hogan do things you never thought you would see. You'll see a heel in Nick Bockwinkel that you might have saw 20 years after that when Jericho tried to do the same thing, but there is nothing like a Nick Bockwinkel world title match that you could even compare to nowadays.
And his promos, oh my goodness. Nick Bockwinkel as a heel, especially when he was with Heenan. Wow. Talk about a double-fisted punch in the face. Wow. Those two together were unbelievable. And Nick Bockwinkel was better than Bobby.
Yes.
And he might have been the only one to this day in that moment to this day, but that was better than Bobby. He was so, usually you put a guy like Bobby with somebody that needs him.
Yep.
Didn't need him.
No.
It was just another layer of heat because Bobby was magic. He was a master. And so was Nick. But they contrasted each other, right? There was a contrast in their characters. Even though they were both heels, they were two different kind of heels. Bobby was a slimy, chicken shit, smarmy, loudmouth guy that anybody knew that if they had the opportunity could probably kick his ass because that's what he wanted you to feel. Maybe not in real life, but that's what he wanted you to feel. Nick was a heel, but he was the arrogant, so much better than you.
Yep.
He didn't spit at babies. He didn't cuss anybody. In fact, not only did he not cuss anybody out, he'd cut a promo on you and you'd have, because they didn't have a Google machine back then, he cut a promo on TV and you spent 45 minutes in a Thorndike Barnhart 7-pound dictionary, red cover and all, trying to figure out what he just said.
Yep.
He was that good, man. He was awesome.
And also an underrated part of that, and I don't think he gets enough credit either, Mean Gene Okerlund being the straight man for these promos and feeding the lines he needs to. Something I honestly feel like is missing today in interviews.
People, when I say it's missing, it's not because people are insensitive or don't want to give respect, because I think when it comes to guys like Gene, they absolutely do. They just, unless you've been a talent, there's no way you could experience what I'm about to say. But you could take any talent, no matter how good or bad they were at promos, and Gene will could make him look 5 times better than they really were. So if you were good, Gene's taking you to the next level because he knows how to play off of you. He knows how to set you up. It's like a stand-up. It's like a comedy team. You got a straight guy, and then you've got your guy that delivers the punchlines. And Gene was that guy that could set up a talent that didn't even know what they were doing. He'd set them up perfectly. They'd react the way Gene expected them to react. And then Gene would be ready for a response. That ping pong back and forth is what makes promos magic.
100%.
There's nobody to this day is even close to Gene Okerlund.
Nope. Speaking of magic in the ring right now, Bobby Eaton. Well, I'm sorry, let me correct that. Earl Robert Eaton in his English demeanor, taking on the Macho Man Randy Savage. And Randy is nuts because Elizabeth is back and he is being tormented by it. You talk about two great wrestlers, Bobby Eaton and Randy Savage, just going at it right here. Bobby's the perfect heel. Randy's the perfect baby face. So simple, so easy. And there's Bobby putting on the 4 Horsemen shirt just to antagonize Savage a little bit more. But you know what it's going to do? It's going to fire up at it. Just basic, simple, good wrestling.
And that's, again, I'm not one of those guys who go, today's wrestling just isn't as good. In many ways, it's so much better. In some ways, I'd like to see more Randy Savage psychology. I'd like to see more Steven Regal psychology.
Yeah.
I'd like to see just a little bit more. It's okay to do all the other crazy shit because I get a kick out of it too, but give me a little bit of psychology. Slow it down and make me think or feel. Don't make me think. Don't make me think. Make me feel.
All right, I'm going to ask this question. Are you ready to be real?
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Real American wrestling. How are you going to make us feel?
What was the question?
How are you going to make us feel?
Surprised, excited. We'll let it go at that. I think, look, amateur wrestling has been around. Wrestling as a sport has been around since the beginning of.
Yes.
It's one of the oldest sports on record. No question about that. And even in today's world, in the US specifically, everybody kind of knows about amateur wrestling. If you have a family member and you support the sport and you become a fan of it, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of amateur wrestling fans, but usually they're either competitors or friends or family.
Right.
Right. There's so much excitement amongst that community. It's unbelievable. It's palpable. Right. And that's exciting, but that won't get us to the dance.
Sure.
What's going to get us to the dance is expanding amateur freestyle wrestling, in this case, professional freestyle wrestling, exposing it to a mainstream audience and creating interest in a sport that otherwise doesn't get a lot of interest outside of the people who participated in it and their friends and family. And to do that, we've got to do a number of things. We're going to have to edutain the audience.
Right.
Meaning, if you don't know the rules, you don't know the goals, you don't know the strategies, you don't know much about the rules, it's going to be kind of hard to enjoy the sport.
Yeah.
So edutaining them, my play on words, is about keeping them the audience entertained and engaged while making sure the non-amateur wrestling audience really understands what's going on here so they can relate to it. I can't, and I don't like doing this kind of tease bullshit, but I'm going to suffice it to say I'm excited about this, no question. But it looks like I locked up my color commentator today.
Ooh.
And it's a game changer for us because this individual has credibility across the board and is wildly entertaining and smart and knows the game. So, and when I say game, I mean the challenge of making what is otherwise a sport that's really only interesting to the people that participate in it or friends and family. This cat knows how to get it across to the mainstream without a lot of training, any training, as a matter of fact. If anything, I'll be putting a bridle and reins on him to try to slow him down just a little bit.
Looking forward to that announcement and a whole lot more coming. We got a great question here before we get to our main event. Michael Stutler. Eric, what do you feel in your gut when you watch your creation from 1996 to 1997? Is it a feeling of euphoria, nostalgia, or a combination?
Pride. Not nostalgia. I don't live in the past. I very rarely get nostalgic or melancholy about great things that happened in the past, or do I carry the burden of bad things that happened in the past? I kind of like living the moment as best I can. I've gotten pretty good at that over the years.
Yeah.
But I can't lie. You know, when we watch something like this and I see the crowd reactions and I see what we accomplished, there's a sense of pride. When we engage in conversations about me being the first one to go live every week and a 2-hour format and introducing cruiserweights and luchadors on a national platform and all of the things that I think are damn near directly responsible for the success of WWE today and the opportunity even that AEW has. Those are all things that I pioneered to create one of the most successful new professional wrestling formats in the last 30 years. Nobody's come up with anything better yet. WWE adapted to what I was doing because they had to. AEW was following that model because, well, it only makes sense. But before Nitro, it didn't exist. Pay-per-view quality matches on free TV, as we talked about earlier. When I see these, when I look back, I see those things. I know that I did them first. The average audience, especially the internet wrestling fans, they either don't know, don't care, or wouldn't be capable of understanding in the big picture. So they don't relate to it. And that's fine. But I get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you can say what you want, but Muckerfather, you know.
Speaking of big matches, pay-per-view matches on free TV, we opened the show with Hulk Hogan. We're ending the show with Ric Flair and the Giant taking on the WCW Tag Team Champions, Sting and Lex Luger. Now, Sting may look confusing to you. He's in bright colors. He's not Crow Sting yet. We're not there yet.
But is his hair going black? I haven't seen him yet.
It is brown.
He's going through a transition.
Yes.
I shouldn't even use that word because people are nuts. But it was an identity crisis of sorts.
Evolution.
But honestly, I think, and this is credit to Steve, this is not in any way meant to be anything other than respectful. Sting had a good instinct. And that's something that rarely.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody talk about instinct. We talk about physical abilities, the Will Ospreys of the world, which I give credit. He's one of the more athletic performers, on the landscape. No question about that. But very few performers at the highest levels rely on instinct. Some do. The great ones do, because they've learned how to, and they trust it. Most people don't get to that level. Sting had a great instinct. He knew that this character, the bright, sparkly, shiny Sting that he started out in WCW as, he knew that character was not connecting. He could feel it. And he didn't know what he was transitioning to, but he was transitioning at this point. That's why when the Crow character came along, and I've described this story before, I'm not going to do it here again because we'll eat up too much time. But when Scott Hall sat in a dressing room with me and Hulk and Kevin Nash, obviously Sting, maybe one or two other people were in the room, and just spontaneously started describing this character for Sting, not only what the character looked like, but how the character presented itself. Scary man. That was the first time I remember hearing that word. Ooh, Sting, you're the scary man. Oh, I looked over at Sting and his eyes were like this freaking big. His jaw was down to here. I didn't know his mouth was that big. His mouth was huge. His jaw was down to here. I'll go, man, oh man, look at the mouth on that guy. I never knew. He was so excited because I think he came at a time when Sting knew this character had peaked out and he was looking for that next one.
When you have a talent that gets excited about something, you feel it and you want to write, book, get them in a position to keep their excitement going. But when you have a stale character, it becomes a chore, does it not?
It does. And it's difficult because, number one, it's risk. If you're the talent, you know what you do. Like in this case, we'll talk about Sting. I'm not suggesting I knew what he was thinking, but I would imagine, even if it was subconscious, in some degrees it is, you know what you're doing isn't working, but it's maybe better the devil you know versus the devil you don't, because that could be really bad. That's what keeps people from really embracing change, whether it's in wrestling or life. And it's very, very applicable to life in general. I'll give you a lot of examples, but that's where Sting was at this point, really, I think.
When you look back, and I take this as a turning point, Hulk turning heel opened the door for not just character development, but for people to be able to go, I've been doing the same shit for 10 years. It's probably time for me to change it up. That really allowed a lot more creative freedom for top guys to be like, I don't want to mess with my character. I don't want to do this. And then Hulk turns heel and it's a whole different ball game. It frees up a lot of creative freedom for producers, writers, and even the talent itself.
Well, and even, and it's funny, we're talking about this because this is the time period going back to the beginning of this show.
Yep.
Talking about Hulk Hogan. 6, 3, 4, 5, whatever it was, however handful of months before the match that we're watching today, I went to Hulk's house because I knew that that character wasn't getting the reaction he wanted or what I wanted. It was obvious to me. It was obvious to him too. He was just holding on.
Yeah.
It was the devil he knew because he had too much to lose to roll the dice on the devil he didn't know. I mean, real financial dice, like millions of dollars a year and all the side deals that he did. Did I tell you he's got a nightclub, a sports bar opening up right across the street from Madison Square Garden?
Really?
Did I not tell you that?
No.
That name, people say what they want. Oh, he's getting booed in Los Angeles and people hate him because of what he said, whatever. Fine. He's remodeling. The old Scores?
I do.
Not anymore. Hulk Hogan Scores Sports Bar right across the street from Madison Square Garden. I took a tour like 2 weeks ago when we were in New York doing the Fox and Friends thing. I took a tour. Unbelievable.
Really?
So I say all that because the brand Hulk Hogan, even today, produces a lot of revenue. Then in 96, it produced way more outside of wrestling, just like it does today. So when I went to Hulk's house and said, hey man, I got an idea. If you turn heel with no plan, I didn't come there with a plan. I just came there with an idea. I learned a lot about ideas without plans at that point. By the way, it was a very valuable learning experience that I apply to my daily business. Trust me. But at that time, I didn't have a plan. But Hulk knew. He knew I was right. I just didn't have a plan for him. So fast forward. Now we're in May 27th, 1996, my birthday, as a matter of fact. Scott Hall comes down, cuts a badass promo, gets the world talking because nobody's ever seen anything like that before. Never had seen anything like that before. Another one. Thank you. You're welcome. Now we see him often, regularly.
Too much?
Too much, perhaps, because they don't mean as much anymore. And then, of course, Kevin shows up. And then it's the third man. Now Hulk has his answer. He knew the problem, just like I knew the problem, just like you guys knew the problem. The red and yellow thing just wasn't working in 94 the way it did in the late 80s and even the early 90s. 36 months matter. And it wasn't working. He knew it. I knew it. You knew it. Audience knew it. I pitched the idea. Nope. See, I'm going to go pick up my kids. 3 or 4 months later, hey, I got an idea. How about if I join that team? Because now the answer was there. But it's tough. It's a big, with Sting too. I had to try to talk Sting into becoming the third man. It took me 2 weeks, 10 days. It was a lot of conversation, and Steve and I were tight. We were very close. We trusted each other. We'd hang out at night and all that shit, but there was a lot of, off-duty conversation between the two of us. We did fun stuff together. He came out here to Wyoming, almost bought a piece of property down the road from me. Loved it so much. And even with that, it took me a week or 10 days to get him to buy in. Now, once he did, he was excited, but it's hard to give it up.
I never got to ask you this question. Now that you bring it up, I got to ask, what was he like when he wasn't the third man? Was he disappointed?
Steve Borden,
Ho-hum back to business?
I hate, no. Because again, going into that conversation with me, and if this goes over an hour, I don't care. I don't know about you, but because this is good shit. You don't get this shit often.
Nope.
So here's my perception. I don't want to speak for Steve. Sure. Respect him too much. He knew, just like he knew right here tonight in this match we're watching, because he's transitioning into something he just didn't know what. He knew that character wasn't working. Before Scott Hall gave him Crow, I came along and talked him into being the third man. He was open to it because he knew he had to make a change. But in Steve's case, a radical change.
Yeah.
And Steve was, and I'm sure still is, a very contemplative guy. He doesn't react immediately to anything. He listens. He files information so he can revisit it at a later date, and he thinks about it. He's a very thorough, contemplative man, which I admire, by the way.
Yeah.
So it took him a while. I want to say 5 days, 6 days, a week and a half, whatever it took. And then he finally bought in. When he found out it was going with Hogan, I think he was partially relieved because it was the devil you don't versus the devil you do. I think he was partially relieved, but I also think he was hurt. I think it hurt him. Personally, certainly not business-wise. But I think it may have bruised him a little bit, and rightfully so. Because I worked hard, and I was honest. I wasn't like trying to con him into something. I mean, it was a great freaking opportunity. It was only hard because it was the devil he didn't know. But I think he was disappointed, which is also why, going back to what else we talked about at the show, the Scott Hall Crow conversation lit him up like a freaking Christmas tree. Because now he had his answer.
It's funny because, like, in the back of my head as you're talking, it's kind of that thought process when he cuts that promo that I'm walking down WCW, you guys gave up on me, you guys don't care about me, you guys didn't believe me. There's probably some hard truth in that one.
Isn't it, Derek, so observant of you, and I dig that. That's where the magic, a lot of people think you could just crank out great ideas like donuts.
Yeah.
You guys are, you got a bunch of writers are all making a bunch of money. Just come up with a better idea. I could book this shit better than you. Everything looks easy from the outside. It's really, really hard.
It is not
really hard. And I think the Crow thing for Sting was a home run because it was partially true. When you can build, even if it's just a little bit of reality, it allows the performer, especially ones that aren't trained actors and don't know what method acting is, it gives a non-trained actor the ability to relate to something and build on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why it works so well, because there was a little bit of truth to it.
I always love talking about butterfly effects with you. One of the things I brought up with you a couple of months ago is that without Medusa throwing the title belt into the trash live on Nitro, we might not have the Montreal Screwjob. But without your conversations with Sting, without your conversations with Hogan, how different is things? How, Hall and Nash's contracts expire at the same time within a week of each other. How different are things if it's 3 months of Hall and then Nash and then...
I mean, the NWO wouldn't have happened. That's a cool thing to think about, Derek. Thanks for bringing it up. So let's play that out. Scott Hall comes in. His contract's up. Kevin's not up for 3 months or 6 months, whatever the case. But down the road, you think I would have sat on Scott and said, let's just wait till Kevin's ready?
No.
I wouldn't have done it.
No.
I would like to think I would have done it. I would like to lie to you and tell you that I would have done it. Not that I would like to, because if I'd like to, I would. But it would be easy for me to say, oh, I absolutely would have waited because I'm a genius after all. I see things into the future. Well, that's true, actually, in many respects. Not in this context. No, I would have made a different decision and there'd be no NWL.
It's just crazy to me how it all falls in line. We have finished the episode. You handcuffed Bobby Heenan to end the show, by the way, just so you know that. I don't know why.
Inside secret?
Yeah.
He liked it.